Hey guys and dolls. Before we jump into this episode, a note about our content today. This is created for adult audiences only. We advise listener discretion as this conversation focuses on sexual, physical, and emotional abuse. Might be a lot to take in, so if you need a breather, take a break and come back later. This is your Pain Game podcast, where we talk about the game of living in and with chronic pain and trauma, getting to the heart of how to heal. I am your host, Lyndsay Soprano. On this show, I plan on discussing with doctors, chronic pain patients, holistic practitioners, loved ones, and anybody that is interested in having their voice heard in the chronic pain and trauma world that we live in. Abuse and trauma are topics that we touch on in almost every episode of the show. Domestic violence, also known as domestic abuse or intimate partner violence, comes in many shapes, right? And it also involves children and parents, the elderly, and can assume multiple forms. Our usual ones that we're all normally aware of is physical, verbal, emotional, and sexual abuse. But there is also three others that, well, there's more than three, unfortunately, but the other three are economic, religious, and reproductive. And I didn't even think about the reproductive and religious aspect of abuse. So it was weird when I was like kind of Googling around about it. But, you know, religious abuse is abuse that's administered under the guise of religion, including harassment and humiliation, and can obviously result in a ton of psychological trauma. And then reproductive abuse or coercion is a collection of behaviors that interfere with decision-making related to reproductive health. And as a woman of stay away from my body, my choice, that is definitely one that I will stand up tall for anybody that wants to stand up for their, to not be abused from a reproductive perspective. But I can't imagine having suffered in my life in half of these categories, but I have. And the horrible things that are endured with any domestic abuse can't be measured against another's experience, right? So every color of the rainbow exists in an abusive situation. And so not one is any worse or less worse than anybody else's experience of it. To me, abuse is abuse, and nobody experiences it the same and nobody processes it the same. And not everybody has it sit in their body the same way or sit in their brain the same way, affect who they are the same way. And one of the things that I think is important in our culture is to break this intergenerational cycle of abuse, right? Because a lot of abusers come from being abused, and we've got to break that, man. And as someone who's been through so much abuse, I understand the importance of breaking the cycle and getting the F out. And it was really scary to escape. And I use the word escape specifically because that is what I did. I had to plan and hide and scheme and do all this behind the scenes work and still placate and pretend that I was going to be staying. It was so scary. And talking about this brings up a lot of that shit from back then. So thank you to my guest who's going to be here in just a second. But I mean, I felt trapped beyond my control, you know, and I lived in fear every moment of my life. And if I'm truly honest with myself, I shouldn't have married the person that I did. Hindsight, right? And I've said that I have very little regret in my life. And most of the time that's true because it's shaped who I am as a woman and has made me stronger. You know, hear me roar. But marrying my ex-husband is my biggest regret in life. Hard stop. There are days I wish I never met him. And as I become happier and healthier and stronger, the more I wish I had a decade of my life, a decade of my life would just disappear. And unfortunately, we can't wipe away those pasts. We can only heal from them. And so my guest today is no stranger, unfortunately, to domestic abuse. Her story is one of surviving and thriving after 18 years of staying in a violent marriage. One day she woke up and said, I'm getting the F out of here. And her message is pretty loud and she's pretty proud about it. And she's pretty proud about setting yourself free and then thriving your ass off, right? So without further ado, my guest today is Megan Anderson. Hi, Megan.
Hi, thanks for having me on the show, Lyndsay.
No problem, sweetie. So you're cool sharing the story of surviving domestic violence and how you turned this into passion, purpose, and power.
Absolutely. It is my purpose to share the story.
I know. Isn't it sad that this is what has become our purpose? Yeah. But you know what? You and I and all of the other people that come on my show and your show, we're doing what we can to help others. So I'd like to start with a brief story about what happened to you and how you finally got out on your quote unquote freedom day in February of 2019.
Yes. The story, to put it in perspective, I always start with how old I am. I'm 41, almost 42. So the story actually started now 22 years ago. I was 20 years old. Sadly, every single category that you listed of abuse, raise my hand. Been there, done that, all of it. Every single one. And I think that gives me a very unique perspective into helping other people because there's no shut me up. There's no, I'm not going to tell it. I'm not going to. So, the short version of the story starts in Colorado. We both lived in Colorado. We met. We were 20. It was,
of course,
a love bombing. He was great. It was amazing. It was wonderful. A month into the relationship, and all of a sudden comes to my house one day and says, let's move to California. Heck yes!
Yes,
I did not want to live
here.
Let's do this. Let's get out of Colorado. Let's go live somewhere else. Let's have an adventure. Let's be 20. Let's go do something, right? Takes me to Colorado. Okay, looking back. Yep. Step number 1, love bomb. Step number 2, took me away from all the security and safety I'd ever known from the town that I grew up in. Okay, at this point, I'm 20, never left the town, right? Get there. We are a few weeks in, and the first incident happened. And the first incident happened because I said no to sex for the first time. We were in a hotel because we hadn't yet found an apartment. We were working odd jobs. And it was the first and only time he actually beat the ever living shit out of me. Like full on what we think of Hollywood beat the shit out of me, right? Bruises, bleeding, hair pulled, like all of it. Sadly, the cops got called. I called the cops on him only because he threatened to commit suicide. And I was more scared about that. I'm bleeding. I'm bruised. I very obviously look like I'd just been through a few rounds with a boxer, right?
Yeah. But let's worry about our abuser.
Yep.
Protecting.
That's right. They left me to deal with the hotel manager, who was, of course, freaking out because there were holes in the walls and all the stuff I had to pay for. Next day, I go pick him up. California has a mandatory 24 hold when someone threatens to commit suicide and cops are called. So they took him to the site, went to pick him up the next day. To my ever-loving regret, and this is the only regret that I have, is I went and picked him up because I was too scared to call anyone from back home because I didn't think they would believe me. So I went and picked him up, and we proceeded for the next 18 years. I married him 5 years later. So we were 5 years into the relationship when I married him. We do have a child together. Came along 8 years later. So we talk about the reproductive part. I didn't want kids. I really didn't want kids. And my ex wanted 6.
Oh my God, no.
And I was secretly taking birth control until what happened was I have factor V deficiency. For those who don't know what that is, there's a blood clotting disorder that is exacerbated when you take estrogen hormone-based pills, which I was taking. I had a heart attack at 26. Could no longer secretly take the pills. Here's where medical failed me. They refused to give me an IUD or any kind of protection, even though I'm looking at the doctor, who's a mandatory reporter and did not mandatory report that I am actively in an abusive situation and do not want to bring children in. Was refused an IUD, was told to practice the rhythm method.
Oh my gosh.
And here comes religion into the story right now. Religious abuse happened as a child, but here it is happening again in the massive of reproductive. Well, big surprise. A few months later, I was pregnant with the most amazing human on the face of this planet, my son. The best thing that ever happened to me. So I am eternally grateful. Luckily, after that, I was allowed to have an IUD. Thank you, medical world, because now I'd had a child and my body could handle it. So we didn't have any more children. 10 years later, I finally left. Our son was 10.
Now, during that span of time, you were obviously going through more abuse consistently through that. Obviously, the religious abuse, and sexual abuse. And when you're saying no and he's saying yes, it's like, that doesn't mean maybe.
No. And a lot of people think the sexual abuse, let me explain how spousal rape actually happens. He never forced himself on me. He never held me down. He never tied me up. He never beat me while it was happening. And he didn't have to. Because remember, day one, when he started beating me, it's because I said no. No is no longer a safe word. That means for 18 years, I laid down, opened my legs, and let someone violate my body for 18 years. And that realization did not come to me until I was gone.
Right. So you are free. What is that? What does freedom mean to you now?
Oh, freedom. Let's talk about that. So you talked about, having to cajole and, manipulate your way. So I actually went and did the whole full on, got the attorney, filed for divorce, big, loud, bang, splash, not safe.
Nope.
Canceled the divorce. Actually canceled. That was the beginning of 2019. Actually canceled the divorce and realized he wasn't going to sign a single piece of paper ever. So to my actual ever-loving surprise, I'm a pretty damn good manipulator. I learned my whole life how to manipulate the manipulator. And I actually got him in August of 2019. August 2nd was my freedom date. I got him to leave on his own volition. I told him we were just going to have a trial separation. I needed some space. He needed to find some place to live. It was going to be 3 weeks. In those 3 weeks, I filed the divorce papers, filed a TPO, the temporary protection order, and took back all the financial, like he had drained the bank accounts. I'm still finding out about stuff he opened in my name.
Wow.
Like literally just weeks ago found stuff. So I manipulated him out of the house because I knew once he exited the house, all I had to do was just not let him back in. And it worked. And he signed all the pieces of paper. And because his particular area of abuse is that he wants to be the victim. So I'm just like, let me hand you the biggest victim card ever. Oh, my wife of 18 years took my son and left. Oh, tragedy.
Oh, yeah.
Tragedy.
I totally identify with the woe is me side of it for sure. For sure. I come from a little bit of money that I don't have until my parents passed. But when we were going through our shit, he legitimately said, how dare you take my inheritance away from me?
Oh, wow.
My parents were like, that's rich.
Oh my God.
Like my parents worked their asses off for their whole life and saved and scrimped and worked their butts off to provide for me. And I'm an only child. And so it's just like the nerve of the victim card. And I'm not saying that I was perfect, but dear Lord. Yeah.
No, and I think that's what, for me, you'd ask what freedom really meant for me. And I think freedom for me just meant I got control back of my brain, my body, my soul. Like I was finally, and I literally just last night had this massive epiphany, like massive, he was abused by his mother, which means he was raised from birth. She had him at 18 years old. She was pregnant at 17. So I'm sure she tried to self-abort. I'm sure that he was abused from womb, just like my son. He hated women. He wanted to punish women. I always lied to myself in the back of my head that said, he doesn't know what he's doing. He just doesn't. Yeah, he fucking did.
Yeah.
He wanted what he was doing. It got him off what he was doing to me every single time, because that man could cause more pain without leaving a single mark on my body than any human I've ever met.
Oh my gosh. I mean, going through, people, when I was saying earlier about how you can't compare somebody else's experience to another, like, oh my gosh, they were sexually abused, but this one's only verbally abused. Oh my God. Do you know how tough it is to be verbally abused every moment of your damn life? Bing, bing, bing. Horrible. It is so incredibly painful, and you don't have a bruise to show.
Nope.
I know. I know. I lived it. It's horrible. Horrible.
And that's the stuff that, I have physical stuff? Yes. The last fight, the last physical fight we ever had was February 2019, as you'd mentioned. He broke my tailbone. Like it is broken off. There's two choices in life: live with the pain or fuse it and risk paralysis.
Yeah.
Thanks. Constant pain.
I think I'll take the former.
I think I'll take the pain. And I'm blessed that it's not constant. Like I do not live with constant pain. But again, we're going to sit here and I'm sitting on a cushion and everything. But when I get up, it's going to be sore. It's going to hurt. I'm going to have to go through this whole routine of icing it and stretching. And that's okay. I would rather that, than be with him and not, the mental emotional stuff. And people who were never physically hit, I think I get it. Like the last time the cops came to our house, she stood outside for 45 minutes thinking he was only on the phone, because by then silence was the only response I had to 6 hours of berating. He was at the end of 6 hours of berating me verbally, locked in a bedroom. I couldn't leave. And I was standing there, and this is what kind of fucks me up. I was standing there hoping to fucking God he'd hit me so we could just be done.
Yeah.
And he didn't, and he wouldn't.
But in its own way, it's almost a different kind of manipulation too, a different kind of abuse. Like I could, and it could be in the next 5 minutes. I'm not going to do it. Or it could be in the next half hour. I'm going to let you. Yeah. Yeah. Gross. Very narcissistic of him.
Oh, very. Well, and that's I think the thing that I'm coming, from my own perspective, I'm 3.5 years past him, my freedom date. Just interesting to me how much I still, and I know this is going to be a, like I said, this realization I literally had last night, but I'm allowing myself to feel it now because I grew up with a narcissistic mother who groomed me to walk right into that relationship. And so I've never known a space in my life where I was allowed to feel anything. So at 41, almost 42, here I am going, oh, I get to feel emotions, really, truly express them for the first time. That's scary and painful. And like, everyone's like, oh, don't know how. I'm like, no, I really do not know how to express effectively. I'm sad, I'm angry, I'm scared, especially negatively connotated emotions. And just learning how to do that for the first time while raising now 2 children, because my partner and I both have a 13-year-old each. So we now have 2 13-year-old children. And so raising teenagers who then and of themselves are learning, think about teenagehood. Like we're learning sexuality, we're learning emotional, and I'm going through it with them. Going, oh guys, I kind of get it. This is the first time mom's ever felt this too. So, but I would take this in a heartbeat over being where I was for all those years.
Oh yeah. So a lot of the pain issues that I have and physical issues that I have come from my situation. And so I sit in it physically 24 hours a day. And sometimes I get so angry because I'm like, just get out of my body, get out of here. Why am I holding on so hard to this stuff? And through this show, actually, I'm learning to do some of the things you just talked about in a better way by being introduced to new tools and new people and new healers and new friends and just these people that I'm meeting all over the world. And by doing this, it's helping me help others as well. And definitely helping my relationship, with my sweetie, because it's, we've had touch and go moments in our relationship. Some because it's totally his fault. But also because they were mine, because I couldn't process something or I had some flashback and I responded very strange. And I don't even remember how that all came. It was like, it's not so crazy. And it makes you feel crazy too. And you're like, wait, is this feeling valid? Am I allowed to feel this? Am I allowed to feel? Especially you coming from a non-feeling world, growing up like that, and then into your adulthood. My family is the complete opposite. They are like, oh my gosh, they like cry at every commercial. Like we're over feeling. So It's like there needs to be a good balance in between. Oh yeah, my dad and my mom and I are just like, we're so emotional. It's ridiculous.
But I would rather take that than like I said, I grew up in an environment where it was not. I mean, I distinctly remember, again, having a narcissistic mother. I distinctly remember that anger was not allowed. And I mean, you will stop. Get out of my face until you stop. Oh, you're not going to get out of my face? Now I'm going to hurt you.
Well, this is exactly what I talked about breaking these cycles from generations, because you were in that cycle. And because of that, you allowed yourself to be treated that way, because what else did you know? Even though logically we're like, this is bad. That's happening in my life.
Oh, yeah.
Well, why didn't you just leave? Oh my God. Shut up. I want to kill that person who says that. Why didn't you just leave?
And I look at them.
Why don't you put down your cookies and your cupcakes? Having a hard time with that one, are ya? It's such a slap in the face. It's such a slap in the face, because makes you feel, I'll speak for myself, makes me feel and made me feel like I needed to second guess myself. Was this in my head? Did I make this up?
Yep.
Yeah. And that's a scary place to be too.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, and that was, I think, I mean, I've only recently cut off ties with my family. Again, counseling therapy, great partnership who, actually does emotional reflection with me and we talk through it. But I realized I had to cut off not just my mother, the entirety of my family, everybody, because I couldn't see anything to them that didn't get back to her, that didn't come. I realized I got engaged. I told nobody in my family, but I posted on social media. I'm not friends. I cut them all off on social media, but the post was on my profile. So it went public. They're still following me. My mother sent me a congratulations on your engagement card. Hadn't talked to her in months. Then a couple weeks later, I mean, we're like no contact. I am not responding. I'm not doing anything. She just flat out showed up at my door.
How the hell?
And this was actually the most beautiful, amazing moment for me, was her to show up, because I thought I really, really had convinced myself that I made it up that she acted like that. It was in my childhood memory, which is foggy at best. I hadn't seen it in my adult life, her acting that way. I knew it was happening. Like my dad would tell me it was happening about me, but she'd never actively done it to me as an adult. She just showed up and in a full narcissistic meltdown. And I was just like, you need to leave now.
Boundary.
And I was like super proud of myself, but to see it happening, I went, I'm not crazy. Yes, I'm not crazy.
I mean, you're a little crazy, but so am I.
Well, there's nothing sane and normal about me. And I love that I'm not normal. But no,
it is normal anyway.
I know. That's a whole other topic for a whole conversation.
Boo on normal people. No, but, when we first talked, I'm like, oh my God, she's a wackadoo. I love her.
I am. I'm one of those humans that I'm sure that is growing up, if ADHD and autism and neurodivergent, I'm sure that those diagnoses are in there somewhere. I just don't really care to have the actual full-on label. I'm like, what's neuronormal anyway? Because technically a neuronormal person is divergent from me. So aren't we all just some sort of neurodivergent something or other? We're all just a little wacky. That's okay.
So you got yourself through all of this. Obviously, you have experienced a decent amount of PTSD from all of it, especially when you're having these aha moments, AKA yesterday.
Yep.
That to me is pretty awesome, because that means all of this work that you've been slowly doing kind of just came out.
Comes out in big moments. And I mean, I have to accept, even though, again, not formally diagnosed, that I have CPTSD. There's no way I don't. You cannot live 38 years of your life with abuse and not have that as part of who you are. But for me, I'm learning, and it starts with, I feel everything very physically. So it's actually my son who's in therapy. It was actually he came out of therapy one day and said, so Mom, I want to ask you a question that my therapist asked me. And I'm like, okay. What's the difference between a body sensation and a feeling, an emotion? And I went, they're one and the same. And he goes, they're not. And he started explaining to me, and I was like, oh my God, I had never put it together, that the body memory piece, I didn't understand that my body held everything that ever happened to me. Like this, my headspace, my brain space was so great at blocking it. I was so great at just putting it to the side and like it didn't happen, but my body felt every piece of it. So now I'm cueing into my body trigger and going, okay, before I mentally, emotionally shut down. And now I can say to my partner, I'm triggered. I feel it. I may not be able to pull myself out of it. So we need to stop what's happening here. Because usually it's in a deeply intense emotional conversation, or something's happening in co-parenting or with the kids. And I have to stop conversations and go, okay, I'm triggered. I can't show up at the moment. Give me a minute. And it's a variety of, and sometimes I just have to push through it. Sometimes I'm in the middle of doing stuff and you just plow on through and go, okay, nope, this is going to happen. We went to Jamaica.
This is happening.
We went to Jamaica with our boys in September. Okay, we are hiking literally in a waterfall. It is the most amazing thing. It's a 900-foot waterfall, and you literally climb up this waterfall. It's not straight up. It's like, a nice, and it's beautiful. We're in the jungle and near the ocean. It's just gorgeous. And of course, that was right at the moment my body said, we're triggered. We're going to do this. And I was like, I need focus here, because if I put my foot on the wrong thing, I could slip and hit like, this is like serious. You have to pay attention. And I just pushed and because the kids are around and they both know that I'm triggered. So they're trying to regulate me. And my partner just looked at me and goes, what do you need? And I said, I need to be left alone. You get the kids. I will get me, because I got to get me through this. So I couldn't focus on anything else. And so I literally, I do this thing where I just put blinders on and I look at the very thing in front of me, one step at a time. And it's how I deal emotionally with it too. What's one step? Where can I say yes? Yes, I can take that foot. Boom. Okay. That rock's slippery. Yes, I can take that one. And it literally became, for 45 grueling minutes, walking up this waterfall. And we got to the top and I turned around and you can look down and you see the ocean. It's this beautiful view. I just started crying. And the guide was like, everything okay? like most people are happy and smiling, and I'm just losing it. I'm like, I'm happy. I'm really happy.
Welcome to the world of feeling emotions.
I think that's the thing about being triggered, is the more we embrace that, okay, there may be nothing I can do to stop the trigger, but I know I can come out the other side. I know that there is another side to it. So I just constantly ask myself, what do I need? What do I need? What do I need? And I've started realizing that I became the mother. I'm the type of mother that I wished I always had. So now inside my head, I mom myself.
Mom yourself. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Honey, I just did this TikTok, I think it was last week or week before. I love pancakes. Absolutely. It's just one of those like kitty childhood things. I love pancakes. And there was one morning, I'll make them for myself a lot of times when it's just me. But the other morning, I'm like, literally the conversation went, my kid voice, eggs. And I'm like, oh, but honey, I'm too tired to make pancakes. Go get pancakes. And I really do. Like, I talk in two voices. This is where I sound crazy, but I think every survivor gets this, where you're like talking in two voices to yourself. And then I got to the restaurant and I was like so proud of myself, because it was so many things. I took myself out of the house. I'm fairly agoraphobic. I don't do that. I don't like eating by myself. That's hard for me. I did that. I really wanted pancakes and I ordered myself pancakes. And I was like, at the end of that, so like, just pulled myself through an entire trigger, got the thing I needed and wanted, and I'm happy. Wow.
Yeah. And even though it's simple, it's a version of a grounding technique that you're applying, which I think is really cool. And I'm learning more about them on the show, because people are coming on and telling me things that they do to self-care, to self-soothe. I mean, one of my girls, she's like, she rocks herself. I mean, there's, a bunch of people, we've all talked about putting your feet out in the grass, getting into the earth, getting grounded. It's very, very powerful and simple, but you need to read, my dear, the book, The Body Keeps the Score.
I've heard of it. I have not read it, but I've heard of it.
Yeah, you have to buy it and read it. I'm not kidding, because and it'll ring really true for you, because it absolutely talks about how our bodies hold on to trauma, and our body is keeping the score. And that's what I'm working through on, getting through past traumas and this, that, and the other thing, pushing those through, because it's like, oh, we just stuff it down and we stuff it down and we stuff it down. And then all of a sudden, like, we get triggered. And then I, like the other day, I was in the sauna. I have an infrared sauna and I sauna every morning, and I use it for meditation. Sometimes I'm reading whatever I do in there, dong, 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 like all my little things that I do in there. It's my only space where nobody's in there but me.
Nice.
Give me 45 minutes. Don't open the door, please. Yep. But I get in there, and so much of that is my grounding, and so much of that is going through like, okay, it's a lot of self-talk. It's like, all right, you're going to make it through today, because what's the alternative? And there's going to be something that comes up. And so something came up from college, which was a terrible, terrible memory that I 100% forgot about. I haven't thought about it since I was like 21 years old. And it came out in the middle of my sauna the other day, and I was wrecked. And I just had to go, okay, well, why did that come out? And what can I do about that? Instead of like just freaking out and being reactive to it and doing something stupid or saying something stupid or taking it out on our loved ones, because we tend to do that.
We do. Yes, we do.
I don't like that. But it's how we cope, and we're trying our best to cope through the chronic pain for myself, 24 hours a day is enough of in itself. Add the 17,000 other things that we all do have to do during the day. Okay, I'm so proud of you for doing the self-care, and they've got the little mom-daughter voice in your head, which is cute. I'm a Gemini, so I understand having conversations with myself every day.
You get the twin thing.
I do.
I'm not a Gemini.
And I've worked from home for almost 24 years, so
Yeah.
I am definitely talking to myself all the time. And I catch myself when my sweetie's home, and I'm like, da-da-da-da, blah, 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 like just having my own conversation. I'm like, geez, Louise, he must just think I am bat shit sometimes.
I does. He's like, are you talking to me? Nope, just myself, babe. I'm good.
And I'm answering myself. I'm asking myself questions. I'm giving myself really good responses.
Yep.
So I have a question. So you, throughout all this, obviously you came out on the other side pretty damn awesome. And you started your own business. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that has helped to support the freedom that you feel? And a little bit about your podcast before we jam out?
Yeah, when I started podcasting myself, I started out following a vein that I've done. I've done small business consulting and operations consulting for 15 years. That was where I was kind of stumbling through 2020, trying to recreate a business, an online thing.
Everybody
Totally didn't
was.
work. That's okay.
Everybody was like,
yeah. What came out of it though was that I really loved podcasting. Like I never even listened to a podcast before I started my own. It was just not my thing.
I love that.
Now I'm a podcast junkie, which is, I think, how we all end up. But I started my first podcast in February of this year, just focusing on entrepreneurship. And I thought, oh, I'm going to go nutso crazy. I had a daily podcast. For anybody who does podcasting, that's psychotic. You don't start with daily.
Crazy.
But, go big or go home, right? I actually maintained it for 6 whole months until I had totally burned myself out.
Yeah.
Had to take a pause. And I was taking a bath one day and this just smack in the head. It's usually in the bathtub that I get these epiphanies. And it went, the reason you're feeling unwhole in what you're doing is because it's not all of you. You're not bringing in this whole surviving, thriving, sharing. It's time to share your story. It's time to talk. It's time to grow. That's how Flow Rising, which is my podcast, it's how it was born. Love the entrepreneur side. Still take that vein of the entrepreneur. But now we start with where we are. So, hey, I'm an entrepreneur. I do these things, but the story that got me here, the path that got me here. And oh my God, my guests are amazing. Like these women are doing some amazing things. And every single one of them, every single one took what they learned through their story. And now they're helping those who are walking the path behind, whatever way they do it. And so right now, the podcast, it's a passion project. It is the foundation for what I'm working into being. I'd love to do public speaking and I'm working into that. My partner and I run a boutique marketing agency on the side. That's, that keeps me sort of occupied professionally, but only as necessary, because that's the nice thing about it is that I don't have to just running a full-time job or, having to be present for 30 hours a week can just sometimes be too much. So that, but the podcasting really plays into it because I work with our clients on the video and the podcasting piece. That's my little piece of it. So I take what I learn and what I love about the podcasting and just help others, add that to their marketing mix. But the podcast in and of itself is, like you said, it is my therapy. It is my passion. It is my purpose. I had a guest ask me the other day, she's like, I'm really struggling with finding purpose in life. I said, well, I can't tell you your purpose, but I can tell you my purpose is to tell my story. Full stop. That's it.
Yep. Oh, I've got encyclopedia's worth of story.
As do I.
I think a lot of us can, especially who've been through trauma, doing this kind of show, which is not like a chronic pain show. Because people are like, oh, all she's going to do is whine about pain. No. I love those people, though. They're very sweet. You should probably listen to the podcast.
Yeah.
Because it's not. It is about the game that we play with pain, and pain is pain is pain. Like I always say, what's painful for you might not be painful for me, but it's your journey. It's your story, and it's how it's affected your life, your relationships, your success, your failures, so on and so forth. And without each other to kind of bounce ideas off or like, ooh, that's a whole new technique, or that's a good idea, that like, otherwise, all we're doing is we're just sitting and stirring in the same pot. And we're like, why does this soup just taste so bland and the same? I need a little paprika in here and I need some spices in here. And that's what you, as my guest and the people that have been on the show, are doing for my soup.
Yeah, I love that. And I feel exactly the same way. I tell my guests every time, I said, I probably learned more than the audience will ever get from this. And so from my perspective, thank you for your time, because it's always enlightening and insightful. And I have now met amazing, amazing survivors that just blow me away. And then they hear my story and they're like, I could never, and it's never a comparison thing, but it's always that, wow, you did.
Yeah, and you're like, how the hell can I be wowed by yet another story? That is what it's sad, but it's also eye-opening, because this, in prepping for episodes, I really do my research and I really put something to open that has something to do with my guest in some way that I can at least empathize or sympathize or both. And you know, it's turned into quite, it's my full-time job, even though I have a full-time job.
Yeah, exactly.
Whoops.
Yep.
And it's just turned into my love child. And I'm so passionate about being here, about meeting people like you who help inspire me to keep going on my shit days, right? Because we have them. We're human, don't just look through Instagram and think life is all Kylie Jenner. It's not. It's not. I'm sure she's having some shit days too. All right.
Yes.
It's just easier to have shit days when you're a billionaire, I suppose.
Suppose.
Who knows? Maybe it's not. Maybe it's just a whole other layer. But
I actually kind of think that they just hide it under more stuff.
Lots of makeup and foofy dresses.
Yes, I agree. I think it's all a human experience.
So do you have anything that you want to close with before we head on out of here? Obviously, you need to check out her podcast, Flow Rising. I'll put that in show notes and so on and so forth. But anything that you want to leave our guests with, our listeners with, excuse me?
For the audience, I always just tell people, the statistics say if you are not yourself a victim of abuse, then put 2 people next to you and one of them is. 1 in 3 women are experiencing active abuse of some kind. So I tell people the best thing that you can do, if you are in it yourself, make an exit plan and get out. And it doesn't require money to do it. Make it short, make it sweet, make it imperfect, and get out. If someone you know is actively being abused, let them know you are safe. Let them know you are there. And they can come to you when they want, because you can't force someone out and you can't force yourself out without a plan. So really, that's always my advice, because I don't know everyone's story and I don't like to give the sage-like advice. Just because I went through shit doesn't mean I understand how to scoop it. So
nicely done.
That's my 2 cents.
Well, that's a good 2 cents.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing your story with us today. And obviously I'll be following up with you, because I want to know that you have read the book. The body keeps the score. Read the book. I want to report. So follow her. Her podcast is Flow Rising. And like I said, I'll put it in show notes and social as well when this episode comes out. Happy to help share your story as much as I possibly can. Help others.
Thank
it's
you
wonderful.
So much for having me on the show. Like I said, my purpose is to share. So again, if I touched one person's heart, that's okay. That's my goal.
Well, you have for sure touched mine. So you're 1 down, 20 more to go today.
That's right. That's right. Thank you for having me, Lyndsay.
No problem. You are exclusively invited to share this VIP pain journey together. Let's get to the heart of how to heal with you by my side. Please follow the Pain Game podcast wherever you digest your podcast content. We will be there. Visit us at thepaingamepodcast.com and follow us on all the socials. Thanks for listening, my little VIPs. Catch you on the other side.